Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and welcome to our mega review of some of my most anticipated LEGO sets yet. This is the LEGO Technic Space March 2024 wave. Now, all the way back in September, I got the chance to check these out in person at LEGO headquarters over in Billund, Denmark, and I was absolutely blown away. There may be only 4 sets, but these 4 are some of the best LEGO Technic sets we have gotten in years. I cannot wait to dive deep into them because they are so cool. And so, without further ado, let's jump on into these phenomenal LEGO Technic Space sets. Okay, so this is the entirety of the LEGO Technic March 2024 Space Wave. And believe me when I say that out of almost every single Technic release that has ever been done in the history of LEGO, this may have been my most anticipated Technic wave yet, and I do not say that lightly. I'm a big fan of all things that LEGO does, from system to Technic to Bionicle to CCBS. No matter what they're doing, I'm usually a fan of it. And Technic has always been a theme that I don't really necessarily collect every single set, but I pretty much just only buy the ones that I really like, but nothing really stood out to me as much as these did. When I saw these back in September for Fan Media Days, my mind was blown and I was absolutely thrilled, and I could not wait to get my hands on these. Now, this is part of LEGO's theme-wide space initiative, where this entire year they are focusing on LEGO Space. Across City, Friends, Creator, Classic, Technic, and even LEGO Dreams, we've been getting a ton of space-oriented sets for this particular year to celebrate space as a concept and a play pattern for LEGO. Starting off with the smallest set, we have 42178 Surface Space Loader LT78, which retails for $35, 35 euros, and comes with 435 pieces. Next up is 42179 Planet Earth and Moon in Orbit, which is this large orrery type structure, retailing for $75 US or 80 euros, which comes with 526 pieces. Moving on from that, we have 42180 Mars Crew Exploration Rover with 1,599 pieces. This retails for $150 US or 150 euros. And lastly, we have my favorite set of the wave, 42181 VTOL Heavy Cargo Spaceship LT81, which retails for $110, 100 euros, and comes with 1,365 pieces, making this easily the best valued set of the wave and one of the best values of really any LEGO set that we've gotten in a long time. Now, I'm going to be spending an up-close and personal look at every single one of these sets over the course of this video, starting from the smallest and working my way to the largest, but let me just say that the amount of different functions included on these sets like these is crazy. I cannot wait to get into what all of these sets can do, because there is so much that you may not even realize by just looking at these sets by themselves. I cannot wait to showcase the full potential of what these sets have to offer, and I desperately am hoping that LEGO Technic will continue this line. I hope this is not it for Technic Space, because I would love a Wave 2. Let's go. Starting off with the first set, this is the $35 Surface Space Loader. From the outside, it kind of looks like a standard Rover type of set. You've got steering, you have these large wheels, now recolored for the first time in gray. This is actually the first time in the history of LEGO where they're actually recoloring these sizes of wheels. We got pink wheels earlier this year for Creator, and now we got gray wheels for LEGO Space. Now, to me, this is a vehicle that, simply just aesthetically speaking, is something that really appealed to me as a fan of LEGO Space. It reminds me of some of the great LEGO Rover sets that we got for Life on Mars and Mars Mission in terms of the trikes. It even has some Space Police vibes to it, and I feel like this is one of the closest Technic sets that feels like it kind of could be like a LEGO system playset if you really wanted to play with it that way. In fact, if you open up the cockpit, there technically is room for a minifigure. It doesn't include one, obviously, but I've brought alongside this space collectible minifigure because I felt like it made sense to factor them in, and you can kind of sit them in the seat. As you can see, it's scaled all right. Like, the proportions are not actually bad to have a minifigure in there. The cockpit closes up, and it kind of feels like it's almost meant to be minifigure scale or minifig adjacent. When I interviewed the designers of this wave back in Denmark earlier in September, I actually asked about this, and they said that while they weren't explicitly designed with minifigures in mind, they were meant to always be minifigure adjacent. And you can clearly see that's the case, because when you put a minifigure in, everything kind of scales up pretty nicely, and that extends to almost every single other set in the wave, which is really nice. Now, the main feature of this set is that the Rover has some sort of a transformation. Twisting a knob at the back very slowly allows you to change the profile of the Rover, lifting the cockpit up from the ground and basically giving it a more kind of all-terrain type of aesthetic and look. This to me feels very much like a LEGO Alpha Team Mission Deep Freeze-esque transformation, if those of you know what I'm talking about there. I really love the fact that it really radically changes the look and feel of this vehicle. This feels like something completely different now that it actually is completely transformed, and you do have these arms at the bottom that you can use to kind of manipulate things and grab things, although to be honest, they're kind of too short to do anything, so I do feel like they're almost like T-Rex arms at the front. I would have liked a little bit extra length, but it's not too bad for what it is. Now, moving on to the other function of the set, it is named the Surface Space Loader, so I was expecting it to have some sort of an interesting loading mechanism, and it does have this additional crate, which we'll be taking a look at in a second to do that. Now, the way this works is you push this lever here that causes this to expand outwards. You can move this down. You kind of have to line it up next to the actual cargo itself, but once you get the cargo hooked onwards, you can hook it up, lift it up, and well, unfortunately, that's kind of it. And honestly, I was admittedly a little let down by this feature because I was expecting there to be some sort of an integration with allowing you to actually have this maybe be mounted on the inside of the vehicle itself. It is named a loader, so I was thinking, oh, maybe you can like lift it up and kind of move it around. But really the extent to which you can load things is just to kind of dangle it on the side of the vehicle. You can't even move it up any closer because the closer you move it, the more it kind of causes it to angle outwards, and especially if you swing that in, then it just hits the wheel and falls off. So I don't really know what the deal is with the loading feature, and my expectations for the set, given that the name of the set is a Surface Space Loader, were probably setting me up for disappointment because I just didn't really know what the focus of the set would be. But again, it is just a little disappointing how the loading feature just doesn't really work the way that I would want it to. Otherwise though, I do think that it makes for a nice Rover, and the cargo itself is quite interesting. You can open it up and you can see there's a bit of a scientific, almost like bacteria sample on the inside of it there, or cells, so that's really cool to see. And this does use the 2019 or 2020 LEGO City Space airlock connector pieces, so you can connect this up with any of the other LEGO Friends or City types of vehicles that use these same connectors, kind of having that cross-theme compatibility, which is really nice. Overall though, ignoring the fact that the loading function just doesn't really work that well, this is a really strong loader vehicle to me, and I feel like aside from it being a loader, it just makes for a really great Rover. And I feel like this is just a very solid space Rover. You can do so much with it, and there is one other feature in it that I think is really cool. You may notice that there's a bar here that says lift. Well, and we're getting to that, but you actually have a much larger vehicle in the lineup that will allow you to lift this thing up and carry it, kind of like a Republic dropship and ATOT type thing. So you can have the dropship deploy it, snap shut, and then fly off. And we'll be taking a look at that much larger vehicle in a second, but that is one of the coolest features of the set to me. I absolutely love that you can do that, and I always love it when LEGO makes their themes kind of interconnected with each other and makes sets within one sub-theme kind of work together in a modular system. It is LEGO after all, and having these systems built into systems is just so cool. For the price of $35, I actually feel like this is pretty fair. You get a very decent sized Rover that can do a number of different things, especially that transformation feature, although I wish it moved a little bit faster, is very cool, and seeing it completely change the silhouette of the vehicle itself is very satisfying to just see everything go in action, kind of lifting up above the ground, and I feel like this would make for a really great minifigure scale exploration Rover vehicle, so I'm a fan, and let's move on to the next set. Moving onwards, we can take a look at the Orrery, or as LEGO calls it, the planet Earth and moon in orbit, maybe because they didn't expect everyone to know what exactly an Orrery is. Now, just from the outset, to be completely honest, this set does feel a little bit overpriced to me. It comes with 526 pieces, but retails for $75 or 80 euros, so by just a price per piece ratio, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense. Also, given the fact that it's Technic and a lot of those pieces are really small, it definitely does feel like maybe LEGO's charging a little bit too much for something of this size. That is, until you actually make it work. And then, this becomes one of the most magical LEGO sets that I have ever put together. I actually had to design and build an orrery for LEGO Masters for episode 5, and I can attest that coming up with this on the fly is really, really hard, and the amount of engineering it takes to make something like this actually work is crazy. And putting this together was absolutely a treat. I genuinely felt like this was an educational experience to me. Obviously, it blew the one that I made on the show completely out of the water, and what's really impressive to me is that everything is set up to fully function the way the actual rotations work for the Earth and the Moon and the Sun. You see, the way the gear ratio is set up is that you actually have the accurate amount of rotations per movement for this machine, and I think that is so cool. This to me is the kind of thing that feels like it should have been a motorized set, but obviously that probably would have made it so much more expensive. But I'm just absolutely blown away by the amount of engineering that went into making something like this. You can see they actually introduced 2 new molded pieces for this set as well as one of the other sets. These kind of large dome elements, which kind of remind me of the Star Wars planets or the Jetrax T6 engines from LEGO Bionicle, but they're more kind of spherical and round, which is really nice. And overall, this is a really interesting set. LEGO has finally made an orrery as an actual set, and I think it really works well as a LEGO build and as a LEGO model, and teaches you a lot about engineering and how all of these mechanisms work together. I just feel like the price is admittedly a little high for my liking. I feel like it maybe should have just been a little closer to 65, even 70 for the number of pieces and what you get. Obviously, these are larger pieces than normal. I can kind of understand it, but 80 euros and $75 does feel a bit high for this, but it is really nice. It is completely different from anything else in the lineup, so if you want a very unique LEGO Technic set, well, this is the one, and I really appreciate how Technic is pushing the boundaries of what a LEGO Technic set is, and really trying to give us something interesting and unique. The only downside to actuating it is if you don't have your other hand on it, it can be kind of annoying, like it's lifting off the ground a little bit. There just isn't enough weight on one side to support it, but if you keep one hand on it, then it's super easy to just twist around and make it work. So it's really cool, it's a phenomenal set, and I really had a blast putting it together. Just feels like it's a little overpriced to me. Moving onwards from that though, we can take a look at the next set here, and that is this large-scale Rover. Now this is one of the largest LEGO Rover sets that they've ever made. This actually goes to the other set there, so it's really just this entire vehicle. Now this again retails for $150 and is packing some rather interesting transformation features, and those are features that I'm not necessarily sure it necessarily needed to have, but you know, let's take a look at it holistically and see what I think. So on the surface, this has kind of your standard amount of Technic functionality you would expect to see from a vehicle of this size. You've got the Hand of God steering on the top, so you can kind of have this be driving around like so. You have full-on suspension, which is nice, so there's suspension on both the back and the front wheels, so if you can see, these are kind of like how an actual Rover would be functioning, with the wheels going back and forth like this. And then up here, you can actually just move this back and forth independently, allowing this to really be able to drive over some rough and serious terrain like my arm here. Moving onwards, there's a lot of other different functions packed into this set. You have obviously the opening and closing cockpit. Both of these panels open up, revealing actually an interior that is minifigure scale, which is kind of crazy to see. You have a crane arm that can be deployed out of the back here, so you kind of rotate it here, and then you move this outwards, rotating it like so. And you can kind of just extend this entire crane arm outwards depending on where you want to pick things up, so you can kind of use this as an actual loader. I mean, if anything should have been called a loader, it's this, because you do have a fully functioning crane arm that can move back and forth, but personally I like to kind of keep it fully just closed up here, and let me just tighten up the string here just to keep this in a much more compact environment like so. On the back here, you have this other function that allows you to deploy almost like an elevator to get up to the top of the Rover itself, so you can have minifigures, or you can imagine characters standing on here, like let's get our spaceman to stand on here, and then you can imagine that he's being loaded up into the vehicle itself. It's a very smooth process, so even though he's not attached to studs, he's not falling over, which is really nice. So you have that functionality baked into that, which is quite cool to see. And then you have just a number of other random accessories included on the back of the vehicle itself, plus an airlock to be able to get into the interior. We'll take a look at the interior in a second, but I do want to showcase the main feature of the set, and that is some sort of a transformation. If you remove these two kind of cargo components here, you can kind of move the fuel cell out as well, push this upwards, so this whole thing folds up. And what's really interesting is you kind of have to remove this whole detachable thing, and we'll take a look at that in a second, but you may notice these very obvious yellow kind of levers on the side of the vehicle itself. And what you're supposed to do with those is you literally just pull them out like so. So you take them out of both sides right there, and the entire thing goes zoop, shrinks upwards into a smaller scale. Now that's actually pretty interesting. This is the kind of feature that I would not have expected them to include in a set. It's just a weird feature. You can re-lock it back by putting in these locking mechanism pieces just on the side of the vehicle there, and it all fits together in a much more compact form. And to be completely honest, I almost like the look of this better than the stretched out version. This to me feels more like what I have in mind when I think of a space rover. The previous version kind of felt like a mix between a rover and a flatbed truck, but this feels like a legitimate rover, and I really like this honestly a lot better than the other variation. Again, much like the smaller rover, this is somewhat minifigure compatible or minifigure adjacent. You can put your figure in there so you can see the spaceman is actually scaled up kind of nicely inside the cockpit. Like, it really totally works. Like, you can put minifigures in here and they don't feel out of place, which is fantastic. I love that you can do that with these sets in particular, because then you can kind of imagine these as actual LEGO Space expansion sets, and you have just a much more compact frame here. Now, with everything buttoned up, there isn't necessarily room to put all of the other accessories back in. I guess you can kind of fit these on the top like so you can kind of squeeze those in. You've got a fuel cell here that you're supposed to just kind of stick in the back, but I don't know, maybe there's a way that you can make everything squeeze in. I mean, there definitely is a way that you can make it all squeeze in and make sense, but it is a much tighter squeeze, and I feel like I'm bending stuff here by trying to put this in. There is no official way to make everything attach up together in this configuration, but it is what it is, and I find it very interesting how they have that as a play function. But again, the entire point of the rover is that you pull these out, and then the entire thing just elongates like so. It's very, very interesting. Now, what I will say though is that a good amount of functionality around the way this set was designed goes into making this feature work. It doesn't even eat up that many pieces, but I will say that a lot of the aesthetics of the rover are built around making that feature make sense. And to me, it definitely was a trade-off that I don't know if I necessarily am 100% in agreement with, that it was necessary as a trade-off to kind of make the set in general look a little funky because of that transformation feature. It's very long, it feels very strange, and I feel like there's a world where there is a much cheaper version of the set that is the same scale as the more compact one, maybe an $120, $110 set, that just doesn't really necessarily have the feature. If you like the feature, then good for you, but for me, the feature doesn't really do much, because unlike the smaller rover, where it's really easy to just kind of twist a knob and cause it to transform just on the fly like that, making it super easy, for this you have to actually take stuff off the top, put those stuff off to the side, and then you have to remove these two things, squeeze it together, put those two things back. So it's a whole process compared to a lot of the other functions of the other Technic sets, and that's just something that I feel like maybe just wasn't necessarily worth it for me, but that's really just my opinion. That's just how I like to play with the set, and you might feel differently. Now, as I mentioned, this does have a full-on interior as well, so if you open this upwards, you may notice that there are individual modules inside the actual vehicle. There is a treadmill for like figures to actually be able to exercise. I think that's like a minifigure print, so that kind of lends even more credence to the fact, yeah, that's clearly a minifigure on the dashboard there. So this is really meant to be for minifigures. You've got chairs in there that you can swivel around so you can attach figures to the seats. You've got some specialized stickers for actual food, like spaceman food inside there. So that's really cool to see, like 3 or 4 different stickers for that. You even have some, I'm not even sure, I guess this is supposed to be a toilet right there. So yeah, it's a whole on living area. And again, you can take your own minifigures and put them inside, and they scale very nicely to things. You can close it up. and it closes up very nicely, so you do have that option to place minifigures on the inside of a vehicle like this. There's even a studded surface, which is really nice. So again, LEGO Technic doesn't often, I can't even remember the last time they made something that clearly was supposed to be useful for minifigures and useful for people who love minifigure based play and want to use the Technic vehicles to work together with minifigures, but this is a really good example of them doing that. For me personally, this was probably the least exciting set to me out of the four, mostly because I just liked the aesthetics of the smaller Rover a lot better. I just felt like that was just a more visually interesting thing. I personally am very biased towards LEGO Technic and LEGO in general doing less realistic stuff when it comes to space and more sci-fi stuff. And I feel like this feels like a sci-fi Rover, this small one. And the flying vehicle, the VTOL that we're about to see, feels like a sci-fi vehicle. This feels kind of like a realistic vehicle. Like, I would not be surprised if I saw this in, like, The Martian or something like that. You know, like, it's a kind of vehicle that is clearly, and that's the intent of it, it's meant to mimic a real-world vehicle or kind of real-world concepts for NASA rovers, but because of that, it feels a little bit less interesting to me than what something like this might be. Now, the designers actually said that that was very intentional when designing the Wave. They wanted to make it feel like these potentially could be influenced by different eras, where this is intentionally meant to mostly represent a modern or modern-looking vehicle that's kind of a more contemporary thing, and then this vehicle and then the other spaceship vehicle that we're about to take a look at are meant to be more sci-fi and meant to be more in that kind of high-tech sci-fi type of expansion sort of aesthetic, and they really tried to just offer different things with the Wave, which I do like. I like that they're trying to provide options for different people, and if you're someone who prefers the contemporary over the sci-fi, then maybe you'll like this one a lot better, and this might be your favorite set. It's just not mine because I feel like this is just kind of a little bit less interesting compared to some of the other sets out there. But speaking of the most interesting set to me, and by far my favorite set of the Wave, that is this set right here. Oh my goodness, this is so cool. This is one of my favorite, dare I say, LEGO spaceships of all time. Not LEGO Technic sets, not LEGO like realistic space sets, no, just one of my favorite spaceships that LEGO has made of all time. So this again is the VTOL or VTOL Heavy Cargo Spaceship LT81 for $110 or 100 euros. You get 1,365 pieces and an incredibly robust vehicle packed full of functionality. And that to me is so impressive. Now, this is built for swishability. This is literally begging to be played with. There is a gigantic handle that goes through the center that you pick up the handle, just like so, and you can control the movement of the engines by the gears. So as you can see, as I twist the blue gear, the engines rotate back and forth, so you can again have it take off like, and then you twist this gear here and shunk, all three different landing gear points go in at once, and that is so satisfying to do. So you move the landing gear up like this, shunk, and then you can have this blast off, and it's just so cool. This is like the coolest set ever for me for LEGO Technic, and even cooler is that as I'm swishing it here, as you can see, the cockpit is auto-stabilizing, so it kind of has that like Boba Fett, Slave One type of aesthetic where you've got the cockpit auto-stabilizing based on how you fly, which is so cool. And that's not all, because on the bottom here, when you push this button on the top, it deploys these hooks and levers which allow you to scoop up cargo. So the cargo provided in the set is this thing right here, and what you do is you kind of swoop downwards, you can kind of bring that up like so, and then let it fly off, and this is just so cool how that is actually a feature. You want to deploy it, just drops down like that, and fly off. Oh my goodness, so cool. This is like one of my favorite LEGO Technic sets of all time, and I do not say that lightly. Yes, I'm absolutely just gushing about the set, and I will admit my bias here because I love sci-fi spaceships. I love cool looking sci-fi vehicles like this, and this just absolutely scratches that itch for me. And yes, this is a two-seater, and what you can do is, it's a little bit trickier this time, but you can remove one half of the cockpit, and you can allow a minifigure to actually go on the inside there, So you can kind of squeeze this guy in. There you can see an astronaut is actually in the cockpit itself. Close it up, and it just works. Look at that. That just works. You can have an astronaut minifigure inside the cockpit of this. And I know some people online have said like, oh, it doesn't really look good with minifigures, or maybe it doesn't work for them. But for me, that really works for me. Having a minifigure inside of there just really helps with the play value of the set. And it is easily one of my favorite sets to come out of this year already. And I have to say that unless LEGO just goes crazy with sets through the end of the year, this will probably be appearing on my top 10 best sets of 2024 list. I am so confident already that without seeing like half of the year's stuff, this is already going to be on the list. So again, so much stuff you can do with it, and there's a lot of other details as well that I haven't even mentioned. Like, there's a whole function here where you can pull out this and then see the inside of the engine. Like, they did not need to go so hard on the engine detailing, but they did because they could, and that's awesome. So that's really cool. The way that they use these pieces to kind of create fins for the engines themselves just looks so, so good. And even looking at the back engines here, you have a consistency of these transparent blue elements with the red elements mixed in to kind of create that look and feel of a high-tech, almost like a Lightspeed engine type of thing on the inside of the exhausts. It's just so cool. I love it. I love this set so much. And what's better is that I could not believe the price when I heard it. For a set that includes this many pieces, and this many large pieces too, like these are huge panels, big panel pieces, and even a big piece of cargo. We haven't even looked at the cargo yet, which actually deploys a full-on rover. So this is actually a steerable rover that has its own kind of onboard steering, like so you even have that hand of God steering for the rover itself. Having so much functionality and action features packed into this set, and for it to be €100 or $110 is, listen, I mean, I hope if LEGO hears this and is like, oh shoot, we should have charged more. That's not the takeaway. The takeaway is thank you for only charging that for a set as amazing as this. Please don't charge more for stuff like this in the future. I mean, I'll buy it, but like, oh my goodness, this is good value, especially compared to some of the other sets. Like, the Rover is $40 more than this, and only comes with like 200 more pieces, and I feel like it's just a lot less fun to play with than this. And again, I am biased because I love swooshing around my spaceships, but this is a triumph, and as the title of the review says, Technic Space is absolutely a triumph because this is just so cool. I only have one complaint about the set. It's very minor, but when you retract the landing gear, so once the landing gear is retracted, and you're swooshing it around and you're flying it around, it's very easy for it to just accidentally deploy, because as you can see, just due to gravity, these want to be pushed downwards, and there isn't really a way to lock it in. Like, there is no lock for the actual landing gear. Like, once you have it in and you swoosh this around, you're flying it and you're like swooshing it back and forth, like that landing gear is already halfway deployed and I have to pull it back again. I am kind of surprised by that because typically LEGO Technic sets do a better job when it comes to functionality like this to allow things to stay in place when they're supposed to, but that was just a minor miss to me. It's not a big deal, but it is something that I do wish they just accounted for because it is somewhat annoying to have to keep my finger on the landing gear, every time I'm swishing it around. I need to leave my finger here to prevent it from actually having a accidental deployment during swishability, but overall, besides that, it's really strong. The functionality is so cool. This entire thing like slides back and forth to pick stuff up. And yeah, as I mentioned, this actually has that cross-set compatibility where you literally can actually pick up the Rover as well. So you pick that up and that just swooshes around. Look at that. Look at that. Oh my goodness. That's sick. That is sick. You deploy it like so and then fly off. Oh my goodness. So cool. This is just like one of the most fun LEGO sets to play with in a while. And don't get me wrong, I've always liked LEGO Technic, right? Like, LEGO Technic is cool, it's why we have Bionicle after all. But I never really was this excited about playing with a Technic set until this. Like, this scratches the itch for me that not even very many LEGO system sets do, where this just feels like an incredibly fun toy to play with. And I feel like this is the kind of set that will excite people who have never made a Technic set before. If you are not a fan of LEGO Technic, if you like LEGO Space, or if you like sci-fi spaceships, but you're just not a big fan of Technic, which I know a lot of people aren't, it's just not everyone's thing, I would highly recommend give this set a shot because this is so much fun. You will not regret it. I would love to end the review on that note, on the very positive note that this is amazing, so I think it's pretty much a good time just to end that here. Again, I purchased all of these sets myself. I was not sent anything early by LEGO. In fact, I will not be getting anything sent early by LEGO for a little bit more because of some stuff that's happened with the land, so I just went and bought these myself. This is not sponsored or promoted by any way. I genuinely just like the set. So that's all for now. While some of the other offerings in the Technic Space Wave do feel maybe a little overpriced, like maybe they're a little too expensive for what they are, this is a triumph. I love the smaller Rover as well. The smaller Rover feels like pretty good value to me. The larger Rover, hit or miss. The larger Rover I could go without, but it's okay. It complements everything fine, and for those who like more realistic things, well, that's why it's there. And the Orrery is really cool. It is a very interesting build for a LEGO Technic set. I definitely feel like it does more unique things than a lot of other Technic sets this era, and to me personally, as someone who does feel like Technic does kind of need to continue to reinvent itself and has been maybe a little bit bored of all of the modern sports cars and race cars and construction equipment and literally nothing else, and as someone who misses the creativity that LEGO Technic had back in the 90s and early 2000s, where we would get wacky creatures and wacky race cars and original concepts, this to me feels like a return to form for LEGO Technic as a theme as a whole, and I am so excited to see what else LEGO has in store. That's all for this mega review. I hope you enjoyed this look at all of the new LEGO Technic Space sets, and if you want to see more stuff like this, get this set. Seriously, this is so good. Alright, and with that, we have summed up our look at the brand new LEGO Technic Space Wave. I hope that this isn't it, because I would love to see more stuff come out of LEGO Technic for space. One of my things with Technic is they almost always focus on realistic, kind of real-world vehicles, especially more often than not, and so that's why I'm really happy to actually have them give us some specialized vehicles that feel like they belong in more of a sci-fi world, because that's kind of what Technic was doing back in the 90s and early 2000s, and it is so good to see them return to their roots. I hope you enjoyed this review of the LEGO Technic Space Wave from March 2024. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon, and bye for now.